Let's talk about the Marksman rifle. Hey everyone, Dylan Schumacher, Citadel Defense, and we are back to talk about our squad marksman rifle, our Minuteman marksman rifle, right? There was already a part 1, so if you haven't seen that, go ahead and go back and take a look at that. But this is part 2 on this Minuteman marksman rifle journey, right? And in part 2 here, this video itself is going to have 2 parts. So first of all, let's just talk about reloading. I am not a reloader. A long time ago, I tried to get into reloading because I thought it would be cheaper. Eventually I found out there's way too much tinkering in it for me, and that just was not for me. And that was many moons ago, right? And so now I've come to this place where I want to make this Minuteman marksman rifle. And I want to try to squeeze as much juice out of that thing as I can. And so I decided that I'm going to try the reloading thing again. Not because I think it'll be cheaper or because I want to make my own ammo or any of that stuff. I'm not really interested in that. But because I want to reload and load some custom rounds. Custom is in heavy quotes here, right? But I want to find to be able to an ability to load a couple hundred rounds of premium. I'm not talking about mass reloading for a bunch of different stuff. I'm not talking about making everything cheaper or just doing my own ammo, although who knows, maybe that'll come down the line. Probably not, but maybe. I'm talking about having an ability to make a couple hundred rounds of premium to run through the gun so that I can get the performance out of it as much as is possible, right? That's what I'm talking about. So with that, the very first step to that is to build a reloading bench, because I don't have a reloading bench, right? So I had some space here in my shop and I built a reloading bench. And so the second half of this video, which you're about to see, is me building that reloading bench and walking you through how I built it. Now, if you already have a reloading bench, cool, great, so much the better. I guess you can stop the video. If you're looking for ideas, this is what I ended up doing. This is how I built it and what worked out for me and how I worked through that process. So I hope that you find this helpful. I think that the principle of having an ability to have a couple hundred rounds of premium, you can either buy different rounds and then just see which one works best and go with that. Totally valid. You know, I was about to do that. Or, you know, you can build a couple different rounds and then see what's best and go with that, right? So I'm opting for that second choice, to be able to have the ability to load a couple hundred hand loads so that I have some premium I can put through that gun. And that is my goal with this part of the project. So there's the gun itself, right, which we've covered and we will continue to cover. And then there is the logistics to feed the gun, to make the gun work. And this is really the back end part of that rifle that I think is the most helpful to get that rifle to work effectively. So without further ado, here is my amateur woodworking video. So I had the rock chucker from RCBS, and that's the one that I ended up going with. Here I am drawing out my cut list. So initially I was thinking it was going to be a 6-foot by 3-foot table, but I ended up chopping it down here, as you'll see in the revised cut list, to be 5 feet long, and then I think I ended up going with about 30 inches across. Yeah, 5 feet by 30 inches there is what the diamond's going to be. So here I am chopping up the first legs. I decided it was going to be about 39 inches tall. So I'm making all my cuts here to build the frame out, right? Now, I like to chop the end of the 2x4 off just to get a nice, perfectly level cut. That's just me. You probably don't have to do that, but I like to do that because that's how I roll things. You don't need a chop saw, miter saw to do this. You could just use a normal skill saw. It's not going to be an issue, or circular saw. That'll get you by just fine. You really need minimal tools to do this. But midway through my cutting here, I got really frustrated with the amount of sawdust that was on my saw, so I had to clean that off. Now, I had found the spot I want to put it, and it was pretty dirty, so I decided to clean that up before I'm going to start installing this new table there. Now here I am combining the pieces. I apologize for this shot. This was actually a pretty bad shot. You can't see what I'm doing. But essentially what I'm doing is I'm lining up the legs to the top frame, and then I'm putting 4 screws in. I use that little block piece there to measure, to make sure I inset my legs so that when I attach the attachment pieces on the frame, which you'll see right here, they matched up perfectly, right? So I just put 4 screws in on each leg to the main frame piece, and then I'm just putting 2 more screws in to hold the side frame pieces. I took that whole thing and I screwed it into the wall just to hold it there to add extra stability. Then what I did is I went back and I built the other side of that frame, right? So I'm attaching the legs again to that cross piece, just 4 screws in to hold the legs on to make sure that everything lines up. I used a T-square to make sure it all stays square, measured again for that gap. And then I could bring that other piece in, and then I just screwed that right to those side pieces. Now on the left side here, I did notice that the floor, of course, is not perfectly even. It's got a little bit of wobble there. So I ended up getting my level out, finding what was pretty close to being level, as level as I could get it, and then I screwed it in. I later came back in and just put a shim under that leg so that the weight would rest on the floor and not rest on the screws into the wall, right? I want it to be supported by the legs. I measured out and made sure to cut my plywood correctly. It took me a while to measure that out just to make sure I had it perfect. Measured it out, cut it up with my skill saw. Once I got the tabletop ready, I dropped that on top, which did match out because fortunately I can measure things. And then I proceeded to screw it into the top. What I ended up deciding to do here was countersink all of my screws. So I pre-drilled the holes, I drilled out the countersink so that the screw top would be level with the table, and then I ran a bunch of screws in around the top just to hold the tabletop to the frame. Now, when I came to installing the actual press, this took a little bit of work. I figured out where I wanted it. They're 3/8 inch bolts, which I happen to have some super long ones on hand that I decided I was going to make work. So I drilled out those holes. I ended up having to put 2 2x4s underneath, as you'll see here in a bit, and then I drilled all that out and ran my bolts through and attached my press. It took a little bit of figuring out and problem solving, but eventually I got it done. And then this next shot here, you will see where I had the 2 2x4s together underneath right there. And that's how I ran the bolts through, and that worked out great. Hope that's been helpful. Do brave deeds and endure.